So last week we started a conversation by talking about the Beatles. Some of you got really excited, thought we were going to play music all the time, and we're not. But we talked about the Beatles because back in the summer of 1967, they wrote a song towards the end of that summer that really became an anthem for the whole summer. It was called The Summer of Love. Some of you were there. Some of you weren't there. That's okay. No matter where you were, you know this song, because it's been so well received. Of course, Beatles music is very popular, but the song, All I Need Is Love, has become very, very popular. It's almost an anthem, and you hear it even at weddings today, right? That song just exploded on the scene. I think partly because it's a really simple song. There's not a lot of lyrics to it. It's a simple melody, and there's something about that song, the idea of love, that is globally embraced. We talked about how while it's globally embraced, in other words, people really like the idea of love. They want to talk about love. The problem is not with embracing the concept of love. The problem is with our expression of love. You look around the world and you can tell we may want to sing about the idea that all we really need is love, but we don't know how to express love very well, do we? And the problem with that is our expression of love tends to come from our definition of love, and our definition of love a lot of times is off. It's off. It's off the mark. Think about it this way. A few years ago, it became a regular saying of mine, especially when working with couples who are about to get married, to point out that most of us, what we do is we do for others what we wish they would do for us. Let me say that again. We oftentimes will do for others what we wish they would do for us. That's how we oftentimes express love. In other words, we're defining it by our own wants and desires, right? What we wish other people would do for us. And we like the idea of love, and especially as Christians, or even if you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, you know what happens. We like the idea of God, and in the world today, we will even hear this expression, well, God is love, and we like that. It makes us feel good. We use it a lot, right? And I showed you last week a couple of verses where I believe that's really come from in our culture, from 1 John. Let's go back and look at them real quick, because verse 7 is a precursor to verse 8, and verse 8 is where we get that expression from. Let's read verse 7. It says, Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Now verse 8, anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. We love to say that last part, that God is love. We love to talk about God being love, but the problem is we haven't defined love still when we say it that way, because we don't put any meaning to that. And so we leave it open-ended, and we oftentimes will just fill in the gaps with how we like to be loved, our own wants and desires. And I pointed out to you, though, that in verse 7, it says that love is from God. So God had to act for us to even know what love was. And when that happened, that changed everything. That now we have this ability to understand that love is more than just our emotions, that action rises above emotion, and that's how we begin to understand what love is. If you keep reading down in verse 9, we read this last week, because John points it out to us. He says, in this, the love of God was made manifest, was made known, was shown to the world, right, among us, that God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. So ultimately, love begins with an act of our will. Right? That God rose above emotions and he did something. He stepped out of heaven for us and he revealed that's what love is, acting on something. That love begins with an act of our will. It doesn't begin with just an appetite for our wants. It doesn't begin with just our wants and desires. It's not that there's no emotion attached to love, but if all we're going to do is attach emotion to love, what's going to happen? Right? Expressions like falling in love or following our hearts, they sound good. They make us feel kind of warm and fuzzy, but there's no definition to it. And now love gets to be defined by just however my wants and desires are inside of me. And now I'm in a world of hurt, because those are going to change with the day, right? Anybody really feel like wanting to get up tomorrow morning and go to work tomorrow morning early on Monday morning? Probably not, right? But you got to get up and go to work, right? Well, a lot of times you're not going to feel like loving somebody when you get up. right? A lot of times you're not going to always feel like loving somebody. And if all we do is define love as by our wants and desires, then we're going to get in trouble. If our emotions drive love in our lives, right? If that's how we embrace love, is it's just an emotional based thing, then we're going to struggle with love our whole lives. So we kind of started putting this little definition together. I told you it's going to be a several week conversation, but we're learning that love has to stem from actions. It's got to not be based just in emotions. No, emotions aren't bad, but it's not just based in emotions. Now the question really is today. I want to push this a little bit further. Is, with that being the definition, then why should we love at all? Or should we maybe just limit who we love? Because when you start to think about love this way, you realize it's about to get messy, right? You understand that? You understand that if love requires action on our parts, then it's going to get pretty messy. Because now we're going to have to start considering the where everybody else is around us. We're going to have to consider what's going on around us, and that just gets really messy. Because if we just define love as some intense emotion, right? It's easy to love somebody that likes you. It's easy to love somebody that finds you attractive. It's easy to love somebody that you find attractive, right? It's easy to love somebody that kind of strokes your ego, makes you feel good about yourself. But it's a lot harder to love people who don't meet those kind of needs. So it's got to begin with an act of our will. It's going to involve sacrifice. It's going to get messy. I want to start this morning by going to the book of Matthew. I want to tell you a story. Matthew is, and this story might shock you by the time we get through with it. I hope it does just a little bit, wake you up about this concept of love. But Matthew is writing his account of the life of Jesus. And by the time we get to Matthew 25, that's pretty far in his little book, his account. So he is kind of wrapping things up. And as he's writing, by the time we get to chapter 25, he's talking and recounting some of the conversations that Jesus was having with his disciples, with the people around him, right before he would leave the earth for good. So it's before his crucifixion. And as he's recounting these stories, you kind of start to get the sense that he's telling the stories, and Jesus is talking to the people around him, and he's doing it in a way to be very, very intentional, right? Because the words that he's going to leave us with are going to be the words that we're going to remember, that they're going to encourage us and carry us through along the way. So there's some real intentionality. Think of it this way. If you knew when you were going to leave this earth, right? If you knew the day and the time when you physically, your body, you would leave this earth, and you had that on your calendar, the last month, would you not be pretty intentional with the things in your life? Would you not be a little more intentional with the things you said to the people around you? Yeah, you would. Jesus is going to be doing the same thing. So he's about to leave this earth, and he's going to start talking about some things that he wants them to remember. Let's go to verse 31 of Matthew 25. He's going to talk about the day he's coming back. Okay, so let's pick it up in verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, Son of Man is just another name for who Jesus is. When Jesus comes in his glory and all the angels are with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him, he will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd would separate the sheep from the goats. All right, there's always a strange fascination with end time stuff, right? Can we just agree with that? Everybody kind of likes it when we start talking about this end time stuff. I think because we would like a little more certainty in our lives, probably because there's not a lot of certainty in our world today. But for some reason, we're pretty fascinated with this stuff. The book of Revelation, everybody always wants to study that. Let me point something out, because I think we get bogged down in that conversation a lot. There's something that you need to pay attention to immediately in this passage. There's one thing that I think we can learn from Jesus about this whole end time piece. And it's this, that he clearly promises he's coming back. He clearly, you can say amen to that. He clearly promises that he's coming back. There's not a lot of other conversation about some of the other events around that. There's not a lot of clarity all the time about that. But he does say, I'm coming back. In fact, if you were to back up just one chapter in Matthew 24, you would see that Matthew, he had been talking about it again in verse 36. He says, but concerning that day, what day? The day when he's coming back. That's what he's been talking about. He says, that day and hour, no one knows. He says, nobody knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, talking about himself, nor the Father, but the Father only knows. There's not a lot of understanding, but the biggest understanding we should have is that he is coming back. He promised, he said, I'm coming back one day. This is my promise to you. He doesn't give us a lot of details about the plan, right? But he does tell us there's a purpose in this whole thing. When he teaches about the second coming, it's not the details of the plan that he's putting into place. It's the purposes he's talking about, how we fit into it. So in Matthew 25, when you see him say, the Son of Man's going to come, what's going to happen? He's going to start judging people. He's going to replace the leaders of this earth. He's going to take over leadership. He's going to take his recognized place in this world. And it's going to involve this dividing of sheep and goats. Now, let me clarify something because my daughter would be very, very upset. She loves all the baby goat videos that are going around on social media. You see these, right? She sent me one this week where this guy is out with all these baby goats, and one by one he's picking them up and he's hugging them, and they puts them down, and the next one runs up. It's almost as if they just want to be hugged, right? Adorable, right? But all those little baby goats, it's not that they're all going to hell, okay? Just so we're clear. See, the shepherds kept sheep and goats back then in their flocks, and they were kept together. Sometimes it was necessary to divide them. There was a purpose behind dividing them. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but sheep have really nice wool. Anybody have a wool sweater in your closet? Probably a few of you. Anybody have a goat hair sweater in your closet? No, there's a reason for that. Because a sheep's wool will keep you warm. Goat hair doesn't. So shepherds would literally divide the sheep and the goats at certain times. If it was going to get really, really cold at night, they knew that they needed to get the goats in to keep them a little safer. But the sheep were going to be okay. They were literally wearing their sweaters, right? So they would be left out. When he talks about this division between sheep and goats, it's not because the goat is some evil animal. It's an illustration. There is a time when separation has to happen. There's a time when a division is going to have to happen. There's a time when judgment is going to come. And when that happens, we'll be separated into two different groups. Earlier in Matthew 13, Jesus is talking about the same thing, except this time he talks about the wheat and the tares. Tares is a really fancy biblical word for weeds. So he's talking about wheat and weeds. And of course, if you're a wheat farmer, you don't want weeds in your wheat field. And Jesus is talking about the day that there's going to be some dividing up of the wheat and the tares, the wheat and the weeds. And what happens when we hear things like that? Anybody like me, like if you know that you're going to be dividing these things up, then maybe we should just go ahead and divide them up, right? I don't know what it is, but human tendency is we should just go ahead and execute this thing. Let's make the judgment happen. Let's go ahead and start dividing things. Let's help God out. Let's help God out. So if you're a sheep, when you come in next week, I'm going to ask you to sit on this side. If you're a goat, I'm going to ask you to sit on this side. And let's just go. I mean, it's okay if you're a goat, you want to be here. We want goats to be here. But if you're a goat, go ahead and sit over here so we start to know who you are, right? We think like that. We act like that. When he tells the disciples in Matthew 13, they say, hey, you know what? We'll do this for you. We'll start dividing. We'll go out and we'll pull the weeds. We'll get them out of there, Jesus. Let us do our job. Look at what he says, verse 29 of Matthew 13. No, he answered, because while you're out pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both of them grow. How? Together. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. When's the harvest? Matthew 25, he says, that's what I'm talking about. This second return that's coming, the harvest, it's coming. That's what he's describing. So you can see how Matthew's kind of been building towards this, and Jesus has been talking about it. And he's saying to his disciples, listen, I'm about to go away, but there's a judgment is coming. There's a plan in place. I'm not going to give you all the details. In fact, my Father in heaven, he really only knows the exact time, but the angels, I don't know. He goes, we don't know, but there is a plan. There's a plan. Now the followers, us, Let's talk about the purpose. Because here's the thing, if you start to judge, if I start to judge, how am I going to judge you? I'm going to look at your actions. If you judge me, you're going to start to look at my actions, right? Okay, let's just do a quick poll. Anybody not do something God didn't like this week? Anybody not sin at all this past week? Go ahead and raise your hands real high in the air. So yeah, did I make you afraid all of a sudden? See, when we start talking about judging, we judge by outward actions, outward appearances. Because I can't know your heart 100%. And by the way, Christians, we're not perfect. Every one of us in here messed up somewhere last week. And if I'd have caught you in your mess up, or you'd have caught me in my mess up, it's real probable that we would have judged each other and said, you're probably a goat. Next week, you need to sit on the goat side. And what would happen in this church if that started to happen? A bunch of goats. We'd all be fighting. We'd be calling each other out. We'd be telling each other. We'd be judging everybody by these outward actions. When in reality, maybe it was just somebody in a weak moment. I'm not saying that you didn't sin, but that's not what's going on here. See, God knows the heart. He knows what's going on inside of you better than I do. And Jesus said in Matthew 13, just let them grow together. Let them grow together. Because you're not good judges. You're not going to be good at this thing. Let me handle that. Let me handle the plan for getting us there. You handle loving each other, right? The point's not to damage the wheat. Now watch this. The purpose is coming. Let's go back to Matthew 25 and we'll finish out this story in verse 33. He's starting to divide the sheep and the goats. It says, and he'll place the sheep at his right hand. That's only because in the ancient world, the right hand was known as a place of authority, a place of power. We don't really know other than kings would put their favored counselors at their right hand or their best general at their right hand. It was a place of honor. If you sat at a dinner table, you wanted to sit at the right hand. It was a place of honor. That's all that's going on here. Left-handed people aren't evil, okay? So it's not like goats and left-handed people are going to sit over here next week. Half of my family's left-handed. They would be very upset if I said left-handed people are evil, right? So he just says, so I'm going to place the sheep on the right hand. It's a place of honor, but the goats at the left, okay, so it's a place not of honor. Verse 34. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. God initiates the judgment because he knows the heart. God initiates. He puts the sheep at the right hand. He puts the goats at the left. Let me ask you something, though. Did the things that they do make them a sheep or a goat? Were the sheep because they're the ones that went out and what did they do? They fed him when he was hungry. They gave him drink when he was thirsty. They welcomed him when he was a stranger. These actions, are they what made the sheep sheep? And the goats didn't do any of that? Is that why they're goats? Is that what's going on? See, the point of the division is not because the sheep became a sheep because they did something great. They were already sheep. Their identity was already a sheep. They did these things because they were sheep. Paul affirms this. If this wasn't true, again, you know what would happen? We would all fight with each other. Paul in Ephesians, he talks about this. He says, this whole thing is not based on you. Your standing before God is not based on you. Ephesians 2, verse 8, for by grace you've been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God. Verse 9, underline this, not the result of works, so that no one may boast. The sheep did not become sheep, right? Their identity of a sheep did not happen because they did something good. They've already been identified as sheep because of the grace of God, because of their faith, their trust in who Jesus is. That's what made them sheep. That's what changed their identity. Write this down. Their identity is not determined by their actions, right? Their actions should be determined by their identity. Our identity, their identity, is not determined by actions. Instead, our actions should be determined because of our identity or by our identity. Because I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, my actions should be different. And you get that in the next passage, because watch this. The sheep, they're shocked. I don't know if you want to say that 3 times fast. They were shocked sheep, but they're shocked at what the assessment is. Look at it, verse 37. The righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? Right about now, I'm thinking, be quiet. You're on the right hand. You're a sheep. Leave it alone. You made the cut. Who speaks up? Well, are you sure you got that right? Maybe you were wrong. Verse 38. When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will turn and answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. The perception of the sheep, watch this, is that their actions were not very influential. The perception of the sheep was we were there somewhere, but we didn't see you. Yeah, we lived life, but we don't remember serving you. We don't remember feeding you, God. Like, I would have remembered if God walked into my house and said, I'm hungry. I would have remembered if I drove by God on the side of the street corner and stopped to help him because he was lost, right? Their perception, watch this, in our culture today, we believe we need to change the world. We live under the pressure that we're supposed to change the world. We're all looking for that 5 minutes of social media fame, that we can use it to do something greater for God. The perception of the righteous here, we're shocked. Like, we did something that you noticed. We did something that you paid attention to. They're surprised. And the reality is, here's what's going on. Their actions came from who they were, their identity as sheep. And even though those actions were small, they were the actions the king desired from them. Mother Teresa would say it this way. I used to say something similar to this, and I discovered Mother Teresa had a saying recently, and I love this. She said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. In other words, the little things matter. The things that shocked these sheep mattered to the king. The value of your actions are not measured by the size of their impact globally, but by the status of the one you're serving. Right? The value of your actions. It doesn't matter if you got 1 million hits. It doesn't matter if anybody ever wrote a book about your life. What matters is the person you're serving behind your actions. That the little things that we do, we choose to do because of the God we serve. And when that happens, the smallest of actions become great things in the hands of the King. Our purpose leading up to the return of Jesus is not to figure out the plan. It's not to figure out the plan. It's not to tell everybody exactly how it's going to happen. The purpose for us is to act in love so God can take those little things and multiply them in his kingdom. And one day, if we do that, we're going to be shocked. Isn't that great? We're going to be shocked. So if you're worried about the life that you haven't lived up till now, stop. The king says, I just want to take your life and do some little things along the way. And let you reflect my love to the people around you. Stop trying to change the world overnight. He didn't even call you to that. Our actions are not the basis for our relationship with Jesus. Our actions reveal our relationship with Jesus. Jesus says, that's the purpose of me leaving you here, is so people can know me because of your actions. This is why we talk about loving everyone always. Yeah, but I gotta get a bunch of stuff done. No, you don't. Yeah, but I want to make a global impact. No, you don't. Maybe you will. Maybe God's going to gift you with that. But understand, he's just asking for obedience, that we would love everyone always, that our purpose here is to reflect his love to other people in the little things that we do. I want to invite Judy to come up with me for just a second. I heard a story a couple weeks ago about somebody doing this very thing, and I was just so blown away by the story that I asked her if she would come share it with you. So Judy Nevener is going to step up. Come on up here on the stage with me. Everybody clap for Judy, because now actually, my wife said, "How are you going to do this interview?" And we were talking about it one morning this week, and we were at my house, and Judy and I both have the spiritual gift of talk, okay? So my wife's like, you look at the clock, and how are you going to get this done without Judy and I taking the rest of your day? Because this is going to be fun. So Judy, first of all, introduce yourself to everybody real quick.
I'm Judy Nevener.
They got that part.
Okay.
Married, kids?
My husband and I moved to Texas 6 years ago from Illinois for 48 years. I knew I was destined to live and die in central Illinois. And then we got the opportunity to move to Texas. And we have been here for 6 years.
Came home, all right. But hold that mic right up close to your mouth.
Okay.
He'll control the volume, but if we don't, so good. Well, we're glad you're a Texan now. So you and I had this conversation recently. Tell us what you do for a living.
I work for JP Morgan Chase. I am a relationship banker, so I build, develop, and deepen financial relationships for Chase Bank.
So if you're a relationship banker, shouldn't just me knowing her get me money? Is that seems like what that title implies to me. So I'm probably not. So you have this pretty powerful job, pretty impressive job. I like the title. You love your job?
4 months ago, no. In fact, I had friends, family, even some people here praying for God to open a door for me. I've been in banking for 35 years. I do get the opportunity to make a living talking, contrary to some of my elementary teachers who reprimanded me for that. Now I get paid for it. But I like to sit and talk with people. So I knew in my heart, I'm destined for something more. So 4 months ago, no, I did not like my job.
Now I want you to pay attention to this, because when you start talking about why we do what we do in this world, I know the world is telling everybody right now that what the best life now is for you to find your purpose and to be happy with that purpose in life. And for most of us, when we hear that, that includes the job we're in, what we do every day from 9 to 5, or however maybe you work night shifts or whatever. But you found yourself not happy. But even though you're gifted at it, you're good at it. You're good at banking. You're good at the speaking part, and you were ready to kind of chuck it all. In fact, friends are praying for you to get out. What was the turnaround for you? Describe that. Tell us that story.
So I think somebody had told me once, the teacher is quietest during the test. And so I knew that I had to really pray on it. I was praying selfishly for a door to be opened. You know, I knew that there was something greater that I was destined for. And so I really started praying on it, and I really started studying on it. And when I have asked to hear from God, I hear it through song, I hear it through people, I hear it through scripture. And so I was really praying to specifically hear what I was supposed to hear. And what ended up happening over the course of time, I realized that I was able to hear from people that were sitting in front of me. And it was like all of a sudden I realized, I was able to help this person or that person, and really just quieting myself and listening to God. And over time, I realized I was having divine appointments. he was setting my appointments. And then it got to where over time I got excited to go to work, which hasn't happened a lot. But I got excited because I was like, oh, who is God going to set in front of me today? Who is it that I can hear from? And sometimes I'm able to say something to them that I had no idea that they wanted to hear or needed to hear. And a lot of times they'll just go away and I never hear anything. Some people have come back and said, oh my gosh, what you said to me really resonated. I really needed to hear that. I'm a banker, but I'm also devoted to sitting in front of these people that God places in front of me.
So a total change of perspective. Yeah, you're a banker. Yeah, you're in a job that you may not enjoy 9 to 5 as much, but if God has gifted you, wired you, if he's a part of your life and you're walking with him, then it opens the day wide up. Mm-hmm. I want you to tell them quickly the story of the one young man, that if you can, because that's a powerful story for how you can think differently about your day.
Yeah. So early December, I had a mom come in and she was kind of frantic. She's a joint owner on his account, which means she's equally responsible for anything that happens on his account. And his account was attached to her. So if anything happens negatively, they have the power then to take the money out of her account. And she's like, I can't afford this. He's a grown adult. I can't do this any longer. And I was like, okay, let's take a look at this. And there was a few things that were happening that didn't appear to me they were fraudulent. And she said, no, I know he's doing it. He's a recovering addict. And I was like, why don't you bring him in? Let's talk to him because we need to figure out what's going to go on. So she said, all right. She went home. She got him and brought him back, and he was disheveled. He was not happy to be up at 2:00 in the afternoon, and he really didn't want to sit in front of this person that his mom wanted him to see. So I talked to him a little bit, and I did determine that it was fraud. He wasn't intentionally doing it, and reassured his mother, but I did get her off of the account. But I talked to him a little bit because I really felt God urging me. And so I said, so we've got that all taken care of. So how long have you been sober? He kind of looks at me and he's like, a couple of days. And I'm like, okay, awesome. I said, so you're on the right path. I said, so have you got a sponsor? No, I don't really think I need one. And I'm like, well, you're wrong. You do. I said, and have you got a job? Because you need to keep yourself busy, or are you going to school? He's like, well, I'm looking for a job. And I'm like, okay, so now you have homework. You have to find a sponsor, you have to get a job, and you have to go to church. And he kind of looked at me and he was like, all right, you crazy lady, I'm sure is what he was thinking. And his mom is in the background going, oh, awesome. So we kind of connected and we had a little bit deeper conversation. And I asked him some specific questions, and you know what? We were done, off, and there he goes. Didn't think I'd ever see him again. So the first or middle part of January, I'm coming into work, and this young kid comes up and he's kind of following me to my desk. And I was like, gosh, I guess I should know him. And he said, you may not remember me, but he said, I was in here earlier in December. And he said, you really talked to me. And I was like, at this time I really don't remember, but I see a lot of people. I'm like, come on over, sit down, we'll talk. So we did. And as he starts talking, I'm like, oh my goodness, I do know who he is. And so we were talking, and he had some more fraud on his account. And so we were kind of going through that, and we got that situated. And he goes, Miss Judy, you gave me some homework. I'm like, I did. And he said, and I have a sponsor. Do you want her name? And I'm like, no. That's good. That's awesome. I said, do you have a job? And he said, no, but he said, I've had a couple of jobs that I thought were going to be detrimental to my sobriety, so I decided not to. And I said, that's awesome. I said, you're able to kind of put that together. And I said, so did you start going to church? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I've started going to church. And he said, yesterday, this was on a Monday. He said, yesterday while I was at church, he said, I just bawled like a baby. He goes, I just felt so embarrassed. And I said, why? I said, that was the Holy Spirit talking to you. I said, that is awesome. I said, that you know that you're doing something right. And I said, and you know what else I know? I said, you're definitely doing something right, because Satan's trying to distract you with this fraud on your account. And just say no. Don't let him in. And I felt so blessed when he left. I gave him a hug, which I don't hug all of my clients. I gave him a hug and I was like, hey, stay connected, make sure that you reach out to me if you need anything. But I felt so blessed that I was able to, not me, myself, but I was able to speak what God needed me to that young man. And usually we go on and we never hear if that ever happened. You just plant the seed and hope that it grows. But God was able to bring that back and let me see, okay, this is what you're supposed to do and here's why. So it was really just reassurance that I am where I'm supposed to be. I'm not going to lie, there are days that I have to remind myself, this is a child of God sitting in front of me. But to be able to see it come full circle, I know where I'm supposed to be.
What a great story. Say thank you to Judy. If your actions, if you believe, if this is where you've operated with Jesus for all these years, or maybe you thought this is how it works, if your actions have to prove or earn you anything from God, you're doing it wrong. Nothing in life is going to work. Your job's not going to work. Your marriage isn't going to work. Your friendships aren't going to work. If you're having to earn everything in your life, you are going to wear out. You will never be good enough. But when Jesus becomes the reason for all of your actions, the littlest of jobs takes on a purpose. We don't know the plan for the ending of this whole thing. We don't know how it's all going to play out. We know an ending is coming. We know there's a return of Jesus that's on its way. Our purpose is to love everyone always. And we've got to push past that thing that's getting us to kind of bow up and say, well, I don't really have to do that. Or my job is distracting me from doing that. Or the kids are just really, they're too much right now. Or my marriage is too much. I'm in too much financial trouble. I've got to work 2 jobs. We're falling under this lie that we're having to do these things because eventually they're going to make Jesus happy. We need to act because of who we are. We're sheep. Followers of Jesus are sheep. Our identity has been transformed. Things are different and we can act differently now. Love everyone always.